Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Fashion Beast, an Alan Moore graphic novel with a kind of interesting genesis behind it. It's co-credited to Malcolm McClaren as a co-writer. That's because this story was originally a screenplay in the late 80s or early 90s. Malcolm McClaren approached Alan Moore. Malcolm McClaren wanted to get into the film business. Just like he shook up the music business 10 years earlier, he now wanted to do the same thing to film. And he had this idea that someone who wrote comic books, even though he wasn't much of a fan of comic books, he just intellectually thought that someone who writes comics would probably make an interesting film screenplay. So he went to a comic store, apparently, found the coolest looking kid there and asked him who the best comic writer was. That was his research. And the kid happened to say Alan Moore. A lot of people thought Alan Moore was the best comic writer at the time, so yeah, I guess it's not that much of a coincidence. He approached him. Alan Moore said, yeah, I would love to work with you. He admired Malcolm McClaren. And Malcolm McClaren actually had the initial bare bones idea behind this and the title. He gave him 3 ideas. Alan Moore liked this one the best. He thought it was the most interesting. And he began work on the screenplay. And with lots of input from Malcolm McClaren, some input, enough that he gets the co-credit. Unfortunately, the film was never made. Just like many films, they ran out of money or they didn't get funding. So this was just sitting, the screenplay was sitting in a drawer for, I don't know, almost 20 years, 15 years. And Avatar Comics, who published this, I guess the editor-in-chief found the screenplay, called up Alan Moore and said, maybe we could turn this into a comic book. And Alan Moore said yes. They got permission from Malcolm McClaren as well. And longtime adapter of Alan Moore's works into the comics form, Anthony Johnson, he adapted it into comics form, and it was drawn by Facundo Percio, who I've never heard of before. Avatar Comics is so weird that way, where they have these artists who work with them for years, decades, and they're really good, and yet they never seem to work for any other comic company. I don't know if there's a compound there where they keep the artists imprisoned, but it's very strange. So many of their artists I've never seen work for any other comic company. But so this is what we end up with, this weird genesis for this graphic novel. Of course, all the covers are by Facundo Percio. He's a good artist. He's pretty damn good. Here's the title page with all those credits that I just told you. So I guess it's a script by Alan Moore, but story by Alan Moore and Malcolm McClaren. So I guess he gave him enough ideas that he deserves the credit. It's dedicated to Malcolm McClaren, Too Fast to Live, Too Young to Die. This was originally a 10-issue miniseries, so this is the collection. So we have a really interesting introduction by Alan Moore, basically telling you in a much more erudite fashion, telling you the story I just told you about how this movie came to be and all his ideas behind it. I also like the fact that he wrote this introduction, which is obviously Alan Moore was pleased with this adaptation. It wasn't just some thing where they got the rights and Alan Moore sold it off to him. He was pretty happy with the adaptation, it sounds like. This art looks pretty nice in black and white. These are just various panels and bits of art by Percio. So this came out in 2013. And we have chapter 1. And I assume these are all the covers of the individual issues. Oh, I love this page of character sketches by Percio. This is nice stuff. Really cartoony and just great. So we start off with, we see this kind of distorted eye in this hand mirror. And this is Celestine of the House of Celestine. He's like, In this near future, he is like the god of fashion. It's a very economically depressed future, but he is just like, like the power broker, one of the few remaining industries that is, just making lots of money and employing lots of people. He's doing the tarot, and we see that he's in his office in this factory, and it's almost like a cell, a prison cell. He taps on the window and waves down to these two characters, the madams, Madam S and Madam D. I still can't remember which one's which, but there's a tall one and a short one. And they're talking about him just like he's a sad, poor creature. We're introduced to this woman who works there, and she's late, and she doesn't seem that competent at her job. And the madams basically give her the task of cleaning out the stock rooms. And one of them says, as soon as she's done with that job, I'm gonna fire her. They turn on the big light, which I guess is just, I think there's not much electricity left in this world. This country is at war. It seems like constant war. There's always, it's a time of austerity, but their neon sign is always a beacon to the rest of the city. And so now we see, this is, I think, a flaw of this graphic novel where, I don't know if it's Anthony Johnson. Well, I think it is Anthony Johnson. I think he adapted it by writing a full script, and then Percio drew it. But it's almost like it's trying to duplicate a film a little too well. Like they're trying to make a film on paper instead of making good comics. So we have lots of shots like this that are just like, oh yeah, if this was a movie, the camera would be slowly zooming in down the street until we see this building. And we see each 5 of these apartments and 5 of the inhabitants. But it kind of doesn't use the techniques that make comic storytelling interesting. It really is. It does seem like it's just trying to duplicate, like, well, we couldn't film this movie, so let's just try to make it like a movie on paper. Here's an example of... So Alan Moore describes this scene. In the original screenplay, there was going to be this kind of cutesy, interesting mashup of factory sounds, and these people in the apartments are putting on their own music. So it's like almost a mashup, which, like Delicatessen did that, if you remember that movie, where slowly all these sounds built and kind of worked in unison to make a weird little song. But on paper, this is just... who cares? Sure, the lettering's, he's a good letterer, but this might have been really fun in a movie, actually hearing these sounds and songs colliding, but it's just, no, it's just, whatever, papa, psh, psh. I don't know. It's leaving a little too much to our imaginations, way too much. So we see all these people getting ready for their night out. And one apartment has these 2 military soldiers, and it's kind of implied maybe they're gay because they're just so comfortable around each other. It's interesting, this opening would be led to believe that these are all going to be main characters, but only 2 are, these 2 characters here. And the rest are just pretty minor characters in the story. So here's a very cinematic type shot again. We see the camera is placed like worm's eye view, and all the characters one by one leave the apartment. And as one leaves the screen, walks past the camera, another bunch come out. We see the 2 soldiers untie their dog, and now we meet the main character of the story, Doll. And Doll appears to be a trans woman, and she is basically every night she has to go through this gauntlet of harassment as she walks down the streets. People giving her shit, kind of making fun of her. She seems above it all. Like she's built up a thick skin, you can tell. The two soldiers are even like, one of them's like, I wouldn't mind getting with that. And the other one's like, oh, there's not enough bourbon in the world to make me get with her. They're just being dicks. So she shows up at her job. She's the coat check girl at this club. I think it's called the Catwalk Club. And the evening begins. All the customers come in, and I guess her way to get through the evening is just to make snarky jokes about everyone's fashion. And she's just like, she's almost like a stand-up comedian. She's got like a funny quip for every object of clothing she receives. We see her neighbor. And then we see her other neighbor, who this is the other major character of this story. And this is Johnny Tare. And Johnny Tare is a trans man, as far as we know. And instantly, their adversarial relationship is established. Johnny just starts tearing into her. Johnny obviously doesn't like her. Just kind of mocking her for like, oh, you think you're such hot shit because you're the coat check girl at this club, blah, blah, blah. I guess in this economically depressed future, barely anyone has employment. So it is pretty hot shit just to have a job. So, and it sounds like Johnny's just jealous. But really just continues to needle her as she's trying to work. And, Doll is like matching her quip for quip. And the club fills up, and there's no more people allowed in. So Johnny doesn't get in, and he storms off. Doll leaves her post. I guess she does this a lot, it sounds like. There's this, I guess, window on the balcony, and she loves to go up there and just dance to the music. She really gets lost in it. Johnny's staring in from the outside looking at her. So it's also part of it is like, maybe Johnny has this weird schoolboy crush on her, like how kids will like pick on the girl that they have a crush on. But Johnny sneaks into the place. And he sneaks into the coat room while she's occupied. It seems like the crowd actually like turns towards her and would rather watch her. So she almost has this little minor celebrity here at this club. And while she's doing that, Johnny's just fucking up the coat room, switching all the tickets. So when she comes down, she catches him in the act, but Johnny just runs away. And she's fucked. And right then the bosses come in and she's fired, obviously. I really like Parasita's drawing. Really good stuff. But like I said, the storytelling's a little lifeless, maybe? Because it's supposed to be a movie. Another nice cover. Maybe these were the back covers. I don't know. I don't have the individual issues. So they basically literally kick her out of the club. A boot to the ass. And she's kicked to the curb. And as she's walking outside, she sees her neighbor saying, the damnedest thing. The manager just said, hey, you need a job? We need a new coat check person. And he's also talking about how that night, Celestine is having his auditions for new models. He calls them mannequins. That's what he calls his models. Once again, we see this kind of just like, here the camera would be mounted here and would see this scene. We see the two soldiers who are our neighbors. It's weird. They kind of just sit in this booth all the time with their dog. I don't know if it's just for security or if it's like a recruitment booth because there's this war going on they keep talking about. I also should have mentioned the televisions when they were all getting ready in their apartments. We're talking about, is a nuclear winter coming? So things are pretty bad in this world. There's been some kind of limited nuclear exchange, and it's not looking good for the environment. So Doll heads over to the house of Celestine. She figures, I need a job. And it's pretty chaotic. Everyone wants this job. Everyone wants any job, but let alone getting to work for the house of Celestine. It's like becoming a rock star overnight if he picks you. So everyone's lined up, and we see Celestine in his office looking down, and it seems like he notices Doll. She stands out to him. So it begins, the auditions. Everyone's doing their little turn on the catwalk. And I love this weird woman. She's this friendly woman who's talking to Doll on the audition line. It looks like she's done too much Botox. She has this permanent, almost like Joker smile. It looks like she's wearing the Partridge Family's bus dress, the Mondrian painting. I don't know fashion, but that's not a nice dress. So the two madams who like run the factory, they're the ones we've seen on the covers. They're very harsh, of course. They're just, you suck, get out of here. So Doll gets her turn. I like the way he, just using body language, you kind of tell, like, yeah, Doll is really confident, even though people shit on her all the time. She's got a good attitude. And after watching this, Celestine taps on the window, basically makes a signal down to the madams. And she's picked. And they tell her, and they like, go to this dressing room to report to duty. She runs into that woman, the stockroom woman. I don't think we ever get her name. We might at one point. And she says, oh yeah, the fitting rooms are that way. And she gets there, and who should be the fitter? Whatever the job's called, it's Johnny, her nemesis. And of course she's furious with him. She's like, you fucker, you got me fired. And they instantly start needling each other. Well, it's more Johnny. Johnny's kind of a jerk. He's just totally insulting her and making fun of her. Sticking her with pins when he's fitting her with the dress. So this is very, very much like in a movie. This they call the meet cute. I guess, even though this is it takes a long time to get cute. Throughout the graphic novel, these two just show each other a lot of animosity. So Doll's so pissed off, she just decides to leave. And once again, we see these trying to duplicate film on paper. Just these shots that are just kind of like, okay. I bet a better comic storyteller would have made this way more interesting. And once again, I just want to say I love the art. I think he's a great artist, this guy. She actually leaves the factory itself. So Johnny just got done telling her, she's like, if this dress gets messed up, it's your ass. You're out of here. Like, they might even rough you up. So that's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. She's just walking in this crazy crowd. Of course, people are making fun of her once again. And all of a sudden, she's surrounded by this weird gang of women who dress in this, I don't know, is this like a schoolgirl outfit? And one of them grabs at the dress, pulls this like flower thing off, and Doll slaps her, and they just beat the shit out of her. They just got her on the ground, kicking her. And they leave. She gets up, her wig's stolen, and Johnny shows up. And Johnny seems pretty, I don't know, empathetic. But then Johnny reaches down because her boobie's hanging out, and Johnny touches her boob and says, "You're a girl." And so this is one of Malcolm McClaren's ideas when he first gave the idea to Alan Moore. He said, "I want the two main characters, one to be a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, and I want the other major character to be a man pretending to be a woman, pretending to be a man." It's just a weird idea. So we find out that Doll is indeed, she's a biologically born woman who pretends to be a trans woman. I don't know why. I don't know if that even exists in the real world. Of course, they start fighting again. Johnny's responsible for the dress, so he's like, "You got me fired, and my job is way more important than yours. You're just a stupid coat check girl, you know?" He also tells her that, we're both fucked because Celestine is so powerful that he really, he's almost like a mob boss. Like, journalists who criticize his work will end up, in the river dead the next day. So it's but Doll doesn't give a shit. She's like, "Listen, I don't even like you, but I'm going to go back and just fess up and say it was my fault just to shut you up. I don't want to give you the satisfaction." She's so pissed off that she has to go through this gauntlet of those weird women. We kind of find out what their deal is. So because there's a war going on and there's austerity going on, they don't like the whole fashion industry because it's frivolous, you know. Victory before vanity. Fallout shelters, not fashion shows. Wasted linen equals wasted lives. So it's a weird political group that hates fashion. The anti-fashionistas, I guess. And they try to, they kind of jostle her a little, but she just bullies her way through, yells at them, and goes to the factory. I think they don't fuck with her more because she just looks so pissed off. They're like, maybe we should leave her alone. The factory's nearly empty at this hour, but she's wandering through it. More of very cinematic scenes. And all of a sudden she hears this godlike voice through the intercom. "Don't move." And it's Celestine. And instead of, firing her or doing worse because she ruined the dress, he actually seems kind of intrigued by her and is asking her all these questions, telling her about himself. And then he says, "Congratulations, you're my new primary model, principal model. Your salary is going to be $50,000 a year. I hope that's acceptable." And she faints dead away. Sometimes Parisi's faces are a little off. I think in a few years he could be really amazing. But he's not quite there yet. So later on, after she's come to her senses, so I guess they're okay. Even Johnny, too. All is forgiven. They're still working there, and Johnny's still being an asshole to her. But the power dynamic has shifted, and Doll definitely lets him know that she says, "I'm the primary model now. You're not going to keep teasing me and shit and fucking with me." The jackboots on the other foot, she says. So, she gets dressed up in the latest Celestine creation. Meanwhile, Celestine keeps doing his tarot, which always leads into it's very specific, on the nose, about the next scene that's coming up. Chapter 4. So while she's, while Johnny is dressing up Doll in this new outfit, he's criticizing it and basically revealing that he thinks Celestine's a tired old hack now. Because Johnny's a fashion designer, young and hungry, and he thinks Celestine has totally gotten, fat and happy, and he just doesn't have his edge anymore. And he's very critical of his latest fashions, even though at one time he thought Celestine was amazing. He even says something to the effect of the jewel in the center of the hat, it should be put not in the center. It ruins the oblique line of the dress or the coat. Doll doesn't buy it. She says, "Who the hell are you?" Celestine knows what he's doing, you know. He's the god of fashion. But then when the madams come to pick her up, to retrieve her, oh, I'm sorry, not quite yet. They come to retrieve her. Then we cut away to the stockroom woman. Maybe we'll find her name out here. No, I don't think so. She meets Johnny, and she kind of tells him the scuttlebutt around the factory is everyone knows that Celestine has a thing for Doll. That's why she gets all the special treatment. Of course, that just makes Johnny even more pissed off. So when the madams come to get Doll, she starts being very very cocky and kind of she criticizes the outfit in the same way that Johnny was. She's basically mimicking his words. And she says, yeah, this new outfit isn't that great. In fact, I think the jewel should be askew on the hat. And they're like, what? What? How dare you question Celestine? And they start yelling at her, and they're like, oh, you're in so much trouble. They're like, come with us. We're going to Celestine's office. Nobody does that, even dares to question his genius. So they go to his office. The madams tell Celestine what just happened. And Celestine, all he says is, she's right. It looks way better that way. Carry on. Of course, the madams are shocked. They're like, what the fuck? I'm sure he's had other people killed just for criticizing his fashion. And Doll's pretty happy with herself. She scored a minor victory, you know, for once. So Johnny runs into the stockroom girl again, and he kind of tells her about how he feels about Celestine and how he's drawing his fashion designs. The woman that he draws in these fashion designs looks just like Doll, and she says that. And of course, Johnny gets so pissed off. It's like, it looks nothing like her. Shut up. So he crumbles up the drawing. And this is another thing that's like trying to duplicate the screenplay, where obviously Johnny is wadding up this piece of paper and throwing it right at the camera for a scene change. But it just looks like, I thought there was this giant cabbage near Johnny's face all of a sudden. I had to think about it. I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. It's going right towards the camera for the scene change here. So then the next day, the next outfit, Johnny makes another suggestion. He's like, yeah, this is missing something. It needs like a handkerchief in the sleeve or something. Jose talks more about his problems with Celestine, how his fashions are just coldly antiseptic about beauty and sensuality. There's no real sex there. It's the sexuality of his fashion is perverted and claustrophobic, just like he is. So Johnny wants to make a fashion that's more just about the human body and raw sexuality. I really like this cover. That's a good one. And so once again, Doll steals Johnny's idea and tells the madams, "Oh, I think there should be a kerchief in the sleeve." Totally pretending it's her idea. Meanwhile, we see Johnny in this paint room. I guess they're mixing up dyes and stuff. And the stockroom girl, through the scuttlebutt of the factory, informs Johnny that, "Oh yeah, the new model doll, she's been actually suggesting all these interesting ideas to change the fashions." And Johnny realizes that, oh, that son of a bitch, she's been stealing my ideas and pawning them off as her own. And so who should march in right then is Doll shows up. And Johnny's so pissed off, he takes this dye and throws it on this priceless dress. Like, in this world, this dress is worth more than most people's lifetime salaries, you know? And then it turns into a total Donnybrook. They all start throwing paints at each other. The dyes and paints start spilling on the ground, and they're sloshing around in them. This would probably be a really nice, interesting, colorful scene in the movie. I like this page here with just all the psychedelic colors, and they're just wrestling in it. Get a room, you guys. And the madams show up, and they're like, "Upstairs now. You're in big trouble." So Johnny walks off to confront Celestine. It's like going to the principal's office. This is also another nice visual, which would have been really cool in a movie. All of his footprints are multicolored. I mean, it looks pretty good on a page, but that would have probably been impressive. He goes into Celestine's office, and he actually just starts tearing into Celestine. He starts telling him, like, "Dude, your shit's hackneyed. You're over the hill." And he kind of criticizes, and he's kind of angry with him because he used to love Celestine. He worshipped him, and he sees that his idol has just lapsed into inferiority. He's not putting out good stuff anymore. Also criticizes her for his taste in companions, because he hates Doll, and he's like, you let this piece of gutter trash influence you. And then we see the monstrous side of Celestine, and he just starts whacking him around. Kind of makes it seem more savage that it's completely in the dark, like you can't even see Johnny's face, and he's just kicking him, basically saying, "How dare you?" But then he says, "Go back to work." And he's like, "Why didn't you just fire me?" And Celestine says, "I tolerate you because you despise my work." And that'll be important later. We see more of those footprints. And then now it's Doll's turn to go to the principal's office. And of course, he's not mad at her. And she's actually angry. She says, "What, you didn't fire him? So I have to put up with his abuse every day still?" And he says, "Listen, there's a reason behind this, you know." He actually is short with her. He says, "Be silent." And that's the end of the chapter. So we continue the scene. Celestine puts a bright light on her, almost like it's an interrogation, but he actually starts explaining his whole philosophy of fashion in this chapter. He says the point of fashion is evolution. In Japan, there were crabs with fierce samurai faces tattooed by nature upon their shells. Believing them to be reincarnated warriors, the fishermen threw them back. So talking about how nature makes these various mutations, like moths with owl eye wings, and flowers that can reproduce the inviting hindquarters of a queen bee. But he says, but we humans, we bald apes, we invented fashion. Sheathing its featherless, furless paw within a glove of animal velvet, it took evolution by the throat and shook it until it screamed. for in the image there is power. So this is very, as you can tell, very Alan Moore type stuff, clever, using all these interesting bits of knowledge and stuff to make this kind of soliloquy. Talking about, this is an interesting idea, describing how throughout history, people's fashion has altered, or at least changed things a little. And while he's describing, like, the men who wore antlers, and the silhouette, the shadow on the wall is of them. The stormtroopers, their jackbooted gait is stylized as the chorus line in a music screen spectacular. So we see them, and the whole time we still can't see him. We still don't know what he looks like, but supposedly he's monstrous. That's why he can never come out of his office. He says if the nuclear winter happens, perhaps our clothes are all that will survive. I kind of wish there was more of this kind of Alan Moore stuff in this. Like the perfect example is that great chapter in From Hell, where it's just Alan Moore showing off what a smarty pants he is. That little carriage ride through London with Gull and the coachman. But this isn't nearly as clever, but it's kind of interesting, And there's a lot of things in this graphic novel, I gotta be honest, the way characters react to certain things, it doesn't really ring true. So after he tells her this, which is basically just a philosophical, notion, she's all like, "You're completely nuts. I'm out of here. I wanted to be a model, but to be part of this whole crazy vision of yours, I can't handle that." Which is just like, it's just his philosophy. He'd still be having the same job of being a model. And then he kind of admits that he needs her company, and he really puts his cards on the table and says, "Please sit, don't leave. I don't like being alone." Everyone assumes he's just this recluse, but he's just, because of his mother, he thinks he's this horrible monster that can't go out. And he talks about his mother, she was like, I guess, the perfect, most elegant woman who ever lived. But from hearing him talk about her, we realize that she was kind of fucked up and did some fucked up things to her son. So she was the one who always told him, like, "No, you can't show your face. You're too monstrous." And he picks up his hand mirror. She picks up the hand mirror. And she looks inside of it. And she sees her own visage. She sees it distorted. And she says, "This mirror distorts you and makes you look ugly. I want to see your real face now. Why do you have this funhouse mirror?" He also keeps talking about how his mother taught him everything he knew, and that's why he's such this great fashion designer. So she insists on seeing his face now. And he keeps refusing. But finally, she wears him down. And we have this slow, big reveal. I kind of saw this one coming. And then when she finally looks at his face, he's fucking gorgeous. He says, "Am I very ugly?" And this is weird. She says, yes, you're very ugly. I have to go now." And she leaves. She leaves him crying. He's like, "No." See this spread of her walking through the factory. She's basically heading to the madam's place, and she's going to confront them. And she says, "What the fuck are you guys doing here? What kind of game are you playing? Why don't you tell him what he looks like?" And they basically reveal to her that his genius comes from his pain. If he wasn't such a screwed up guy who thinks he's a monster, all of this would stop. This factory that employs thousands of people and these businesses. And so they perpetuate this thing. They want to keep him like an emotional cripple because they think if he ever gets happy, he won't be able to create good stuff anymore. I kind of like this, how you see them as young women. It's so weird the way he draws them. They're like not even human looking, like some alien creatures. Everyone else is drawn pretty realistically, but this is just like crazy, like caricature. They almost look like monkey ladies. They ask her, they're like, why didn't you tell him he was beautiful? For the same reason, deep down you knew that you didn't want to upset the apple cart. And so she kind of becomes complicit in it and agrees with them and says she doesn't want to, she loves her new circumstances. She doesn't want to risk it, so she says, okay, yeah, I won't tell him. But she also realizes how fucking sad it is, like how much his mother screwed him up. Because she is fond of him. So now we see a little montage of Dalla's now a huge celebrity. She's on the cover of magazines, paparazzi, autograph hunters, everything. But we also see that the war seems to be heating up. It's conscription. The flyers are put up over all of her fashion ads. So we see that like the war is encroaching on this city and this country. So she's got to basically fight her way through crowds now of admirers. Even though sometimes these, that woman gang we saw earlier, sometimes they try to attack her. So she always has to have bodyguards. These anti-fashionista ladies, they really do not. She's like public enemy number one to them. More of this just kind of dull cinematic stuff. Just like, yeah, the camera's following her as she walks through a crowd. I know that kind of technique can be used well in comics when it's necessary, but it just seems like it's too much. So she fights her way all the way to Celestine's office. And I guess Celestine has created a new creation, created a new dress just for her. And, you know, he tells her to strip down and he's going to fit her for it personally. I don't think he ever does this for any other of his models. So this scene is kind of weird. It's kind of like the seduction scene where, you know, like, because he has to fit the dress to her, he has to touch her in certain places, light little touches. And it seems like a normal comic or movie, this would turn into like a sex scene. But it's kind of sad. You realize that Celestine's too damaged. He probably doesn't even know how to have sex or never has had sex. He probably wouldn't even be able to. But to him, this is like his sex with her. Dressing her up in his fashions. To him, that's this passionate, erotic thing. And it seems like Doll's responding to it. She's getting turned on, it seems. Like she can sense it, like, God, his attraction to me. And the way he's just touching me in various little places, very light little touches. And she's almost, totally into it. But of course, he's not going to have sex with her. I don't think he can. She has a languorous look on her face. She's feeling dewy. But then at one point, I don't get this part of the graphic novel either. Sometimes Celestine's hands look monstrous, look like the hands of a monster. But I don't think that looks like a normal hand, right? So sometimes they're normal. And then every now and then we see scenes. We've seen them earlier, I just didn't point it out. Where his hands are like these taloned, like vampire hands or something, or monster hands. And when he touches her face with one of the hands, she like is shocked out of her rapture. And she's like, I have to go. Just for a little, I gotta clear my head. I'll come back and we'll finish the fitting because there's still more left to do. And Celestine says, you look really beautiful. So she leaves and goes out to this balcony and Johnny shows up. And once again, Johnny tries to like just talk some nice small talk or big talk, and Doll starts tearing into him, and then Johnny starts mocking her. So their acrimony continues. Chapter 8. So she comes back to the office, and she basically says, you know, I think I'd like to reconnect with my old place and my old neighborhood. I think I need like a night off, and I would just like to go out and see the real world. Not that I love this living here with you, but I also... And Celestine's totally cool with it. She was almost afraid she was a prisoner, and he would say, no, you can't leave me. Because he is very, almost unhealthily attached to her. He's just like, oh, I want you around all the time. But he says, gives her his blessing, and she gets in the coach. And she returns to her old neighborhood. On the way there, she sees that things have changed in the city. She sees this weird scene of like soldiers taking off, stripping down citizens of the city and throwing their clothes in the fire and carting them off completely naked in these trucks. She's like, what the hell's going on? All these prostitutes are kind of catcalling to them. So she goes back to her old apartment. And Johnny shows up. At first she's like, what are you doing here? She's like, I'm your neighbor, remember? I've lived here for years. And Johnny actually offers an olive branch and says, hey, why don't I show you around? Things have changed a lot. And Doll agrees. She sends the carriage off, and she says, this better be fucking good. And then we get another one of those Alan Moore type passages that's very Alan Moore. This one's not very good. It's a little hackneyed. Maybe it was interesting in 1989, but it's basically Johnny extolling the virtues of like the lower classes, and look at the vitality and vibrancy of these people who are street level people, and their fashion is better than anything Celestine has made in the past 5 years. It's a tangle of different ethnicities and, you know, people who are real, you know, and going on and on. Definitely not Alan Moore's best ideas. We do see some interesting street people, these weird prostitutes, and we see these two like Victorian-looking gentlemen with two like leather-clad submissive women on leashes as if they were dogs. Pretty weird. So I'm kind of glad when basically Doll sets Johnny straight. She's like, let me guess, you know, you sound like someone, you probably had like rich parents, and to you this is all like a little safari, you know, checking out how the lower classes live. Very much like that Pulp song, Common People. She's like, I actually grew up amongst these people in this filth, poor, and it's not so cute, it's not so cool, it fucking sucks. And all these, your beloved working class people, they used to harass me and say horrible, bigoted things and racist things to people, and they're not the heroes that you purport them to be. And it seems like she hit a nerve because Johnny shuts up. So I think Johnny was some like suburban rich kid who moved to the big city. So now she decides to go to the catwalk, her old job, by herself. So the two soldiers now, they've changed their tune. They're like little fanboys for her. One of them even puts his jacket on the ground so she can walk over a puddle. And these little hearts around his head, they're just gaga over her. So she finds out that, you know, things have changed because of the conscription. Her old neighbor still has the job that he took after she got fired. And he looks all like he's got all these lesions on his face or something. He looks not good. And he kind of fills her in. He says, yeah, the club never fills up anymore. Basically, all the men have been conscripted to military service. And so just the women are left, and I guess children and old people. But he also says that, yeah, the only men you see around, young men, are the ones that are have sexually transmitted diseases so bad that they don't allow them in the military. And as he hands her check, she obviously is like, oh, God. Because his face looks like he's ravaged by venereal disease. So it's just not as vibrant and, crazy as it once was. It's barely full, the theater. But the same band is playing that played that first night we saw her when she was dancing. And they actually play the same song. They say, hey, here's an oldie but a goodie. And we see her trying to dancing again, but she's not feeling it. She gives up. It's not the same. Nobody's looking at her. She's changed, She leaves the club. The soldiers are still waiting there. And she gets in her carriage to go back to the factory. She returns to Celestine's office. And she's talking to him. He's in the bathroom, he says. So she's saying, like, yeah, I'm here for good. I don't need to go back to my roots. Fuck that world. I want to live in this world. And when she goes in the bathroom, she sees blood everywhere. And it looks like Celestine has committed suicide in the bathtub. There's a shuffle cover there. And he's basically he's dying. He says, by the time you call the ambulance, I'll be dead. She asks him why he did it. He says that I did it to be free of this dark life. So the mother fucked him up a little too much. Fucked him up enough to be a genius designer, but also he's suicidal. He killed himself. He tells her that he wants to bequeath the whole house of Celestine to Johnny, little Johnny Tear. And that's when he was talking about earlier, how he said, I value you because you criticize me. He even tells her, he says, yeah, Johnny will tear down everything I built up, but that's what's necessary for good art, or, in this instance, good fashion. He knows that Johnny's going to tear down all of his tired, old, stuffy fashions and build something new and vital. He asks her to sing him a song, and she sings that song that she loves to dance to at the Catwalk Club. For some reason, the intercom's on, and her voice floats throughout the whole factory, and everyone can hear her singing. I guess that would have been in a movie. That might have been a touching thing, or it seems a little, I don't know, schmaltzy. Kind of curious that Alan Moore wrote these lyrics, obviously. They're very Alan Moore lyrics. And I imagine they would have got a musician to make music to it. I have no idea what that music would sound like. I imagine something like early techno or something, proto-techno. But, yeah, it leaves a little too much to the imagination, where I'm like, I have no idea what this song sounds like. So the madams realize something's up, and they run up to the office, and they find Doll with the dead body. And she tells him what he said. And they're like, we can't let anyone know that Johnny, we can't let him ascend to the throne. Basically, he'll probably get rid of all of us, and he'll just ruin his Celestine's legacy. So, of course, Doll is incredibly sad about all this, but she kind of once again goes along with them. One of the madams says, we're not going to kill Johnny, but we'll get him a job, far away, where he won't be around, basically. And Because actually, obviously, she cares for Johnny. She says, please don't kill him. And that's when they say they'll get him a job. So she goes along with this whole plot. At the funeral, not many people there. Celestine didn't have friends really. And we see Johnny's there though. And these soldiers come up and they grab him for conscription. And we realize that the job far away was, they called up the military officials, the madams, and told them that Johnny was male. Because remember earlier, so Johnny actually is a biologically born male pretending to be a trans male. So they haul him off, and obviously Doll is not happy with this, but she's like, what can I do? So it appears that, now it's like 6 weeks later, it appears that some of Celestine's prophecies have come true. There actually are clothing without people. That was one of his things, like, in a perfect world, there'll be clothes without people inside of them. So because of in the war zones of this war, they're so irradiated that they started this stuffed shirt program where they have these uniforms that are, I guess, with kind of robot parts in them that can just move and fight by themselves. They don't need a human. So we also see Madam talk to that stockroom woman. I guess they decided not to fire her. In fact, they give her Johnny's old job, and she becomes the new, like, whatever the job title is, the master fitter or whatever. So Doll shows up, and the madams tell her that, like, so over the years, Celestine had lots of discarded concepts that weren't just quite good enough, and we have all of his notes, so that's going to be our fall line. It's not his best stuff, obviously, because they're cast-offs, but it's still Celestine. People will still think they're pretty damn nice and will make a lot of money. So they're totally going against his wishes, basically. Even more so, because it's his cast-off designs. So Doll has a pang of conscience, and we see her calling up the military authorities, and she tells them that Johnny's a homosexual, so he'll get kicked out of the military. It's kind of interesting that Alan Moore is so good at being prescient. A lot of his science fiction graphic novels have predicted things that have come to be, but in 1989 he could not even picture a military comprised of, first of all, women. That there'd be women combatants in war now. It's kind of accepted. And that homosexuals, because, for decades, if you were gay, you would not be allowed in the military. But he couldn't predict that. So even as long as you're a woman, you're free from conscription. Or gay. So they're kind of doing the run-through for the fall line. And apparently the buzz is that, yep, the fashion critics aren't that thrilled with it, but they're going to make plenty of money. God, look at these two. Totally look like monkey ladies. While they're talking to her, she looks up at the office and she sees someone waving at her, just like Celestine used to do. She's like, what? So she says, excuse me, and she goes up to the office, and Johnny's there. So her plan worked. He was released from the military, and he does mention, though, that his last few weeks before they, mustered him out, it was horrible. They beat the shit out of him every day. But he's back. And he knows that he's the rightful heir. Of course, the madams do not like this, but they can't do anything. Johnny lays down the law. And they have a confrontation. He knows that she was complicit in him being, conscripted. Johnny shows her his ideas for the fall wine. He says, "No, I'm scrapping all that shit you've been working on. Those old Celestine ideas. I don't care how much money's wasted. We're doing my shit." And it's showing off lots of skin. It's more youthful, not as stuffy, I guess, his fashions. And then he shows her the dress that he created for her. Kind of weird. It just looks like a boring wedding dress. I don't know. It's not that interesting at all. So it's the night of the big show, the big fashion show, releasing the fall line. All the fashion writers are there, and people are not digging it. It sounds like the buzz around in this audience is, this fashion writer is just confused. It's like, this is not Celestine, like Celestine. And, of course, the madams hate it. They're like, it's vulgar and decadent. So, excuse me. We find out that one of the madams, the shorter madam, I'm sorry, I still don't know their names. The shorter one seems to be, all of a sudden out of nowhere, seems to be very jealous of Doll. The taller one even says, like, "I hate it when you're possessive." So I don't know I guess they're lovers, maybe? Even though there's no implication before. She says, "Go find her." She's late for her, she's got to show up quick. So kind of out of nowhere, the shorter madam, she's heading towards Doll's dressing room, and she's furious. Like, she looks like she's got murder in her eyes. Meanwhile, we see that stockroom woman, and we realize she's kind of nuts. She's dressed up all the mannequins and is addressing them as if they're people. So, kind of funny little scene. The shorter madam storms right through, doesn't even notice. And just, I don't know where, she picks up a scissor. And she calls Doll a traitor. So I guess that's part of her anger, that she's, sided with Johnny and doesn't care about the legacy of Celestine. But still, it seems kind of crazy. And she's stabbing at her, and Doll is fighting back, though. First, she's just running, but then she grabs a mannequin arm, and she starts walloping her with it. She gets stabbed a few times. Nothing serious. And the whole time it's intercutting with the fashion show. And we hear more, commentary from the crowd. And yeah, people are just like not really digging it. So, I'm sorry, I forgot to point this out, guys, but Doll gets the upper hand and really gives the shorter madam a beating with that mannequin arm. And then she proceeds right to the stage and comes out with her bloody dress. Her wig is off. And everyone's stunned into silence at first. And then the fashion writer says, "That's pornography." And everyone's getting angrier and angrier. And this is kind of what Johnny wanted. She looks up at Johnny and he smiles. He's like, "Oh yeah." They mentioned earlier that Celestine's very first fashion show turned into a riot. Just like, like when Stravinsky premiered Rites of Spring, supposedly there was a riot because the art was so revolutionary. So Johnny loves that idea. He's like, "I would love if people rioted at my show." Like, that's how shocked they were by how different my fashions were. I gotta say, though, his fashions just look like they were like a mini skirt and a halter top. They didn't look that revolutionary. They just look like, I don't know, comfortable, semi-slutty fashion. So everyone's freaking out. Totally, literally turns into a full-on riot. The madams are like, oh shit. And they get trampled by the crowd. And Johnny and Doll decide to just take off. Now lifts her up into his arms and takes her to the office. Doll basically says, you did it. You turned street trash into sapphires. You blew the whole thing apart. The old ways are dead. Celestine's whole vision is dead. It's yours now. Your salon, your vision, all yours. And finally, after like 150 pages of build-up and sexual tension, they realize they love each other. He says, all ours, the beast is dead, and it's all ours. And they begin undressing. They're obviously finally going to consummate their romantic comedy story. She just, Doll just lays down ready for him. And then Johnny picks up the old hand mirror that Celestine used to look at. And he sees his face all distorted. And that's the end. Kind of very unsatisfying ending. I think even as a comic it is. I can imagine if this was a movie, you'd be like, oh, we finally get the sex scene. These two are finally going to get together. And then it's like, what? So very odd ending. And I almost couldn't believe it. I was just like, you're kidding, right? I turned the page, but nope, it's the end. So, yeah, there you have it. I got to say, one of Alan Moore's lesser works by far. It's it's better than, I guess, the last League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That was a travesty, but we also get some of these cover galleries. Avatar, of course, is known for every fucking comic they put out of 6 variant covers, sometimes 20. I guess I'm just an old man. I fucking hate that trend. It's so dumb. These are pretty nice covers, though, but, treating comics like they're stamps or coins. I'm going to buy the same comic just because it has a different cover and it might be worth more. That kind of shit pisses me off. Not as much as slabbing a comic, because at least you can read. And you get a new piece of art, If I was rich, I guess I'd want all the covers, but it just seems predatory. A lot of nice wraparound covers. Avatar always has the wraparound variation. We see these weird women. I would love kind of like a comic about them. I gotta say, I really do like the world that Alan Moore created in this. Like, it's an interesting little near future. And I wouldn't mind another story taking place in that future. I doubt that'll ever happen. But overall, it's just not... I almost feel like Alan Moore was like trying to write a movie. Like, he was already an expert at writing comics. He knew the grammar. He knew the format. And he was almost trying too hard to be like, oh, well, now I have to be a totally different kind of storyteller because it's film. And it's almost like he, dumbed himself down in a way. Just didn't put in as much interesting, exciting ideas and concepts. Because he's like, yeah, most movies don't do that. I do get that sense. Of course, it also could be Anthony Johnston's adaptation. Maybe this is very different from the screenplay. But Alan Moore gives it the thumbs up. So I think it's faithful. I'd assume it's faithful to the screenplay. This is a nice one. And that's it for Fashion Beast. Hope you guys enjoyed looking at it. Sorry it's so long. But yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. I mean, it is Alan Moore. And even the worst Alan Moore is usually pretty damn interesting. Even some of the lower tier Alan Moore comics are better than most comics. But it's just not up to Alan Moore's brilliant stuff. But this, I gotta say, is really just like... This isn't better than 90% of comics I've read. It's better than a bunch, but I do enjoy the basic concept. Is kind of interesting. The art's really nice. Facundo Percio, wherever you are locked up in the basement of the Avatar Central. I hope you can free yourself soon. But it's just on the cusp of being kicked out of the Academy. If it wasn't Alan Moore, I kind of am a completist for Alan Moore. I have almost everything he's ever done. I've got like a whole shelf of his stuff. But so that's why I'm so conflicted. I expect way more from Alan Moore than this. But overall, it's not the worst graphic novel you could read, but it's also, you could live a full, happy life without ever having read this book, and you wouldn't regret it. So that's where I stand. I know it's a kind of a wishy-washy commentary on this book, but I'm sticking by it. So hope you guys enjoyed looking at this today, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.